We're now looking at a picture of a 40-year-old Cordyline australis, which was planted here right out in the open, and it started to suffer from dieback. We wondered if it had got a disease. We wondered if it had got very cold in the very cold winds which we had in early March and February this year. But the reality is that, as you can see in the picture, there was a lot of dieback. There were branches which were nearly dead, and there were branches which looked okay if pruned. So now we're looking at this large clump of Cordyline australis that has been pruned. And you can see that it's a huge multi-stemmed plant that has grown up and suckered from the base. And what we've done is removed the old original trunk, which was all dead, and we've pruned off bits and pieces off other branches. It's very noticeable that after pruning, the branches we've left have got huge flower heads, and those flower heads are now full of seeds. So prior to this Cordyline looking dreadful, it had expended a great deal of energy on flowering and seeding, which is a sign of a plant under stress. We know from Dracaena Avenue in Falmouth that a lot of Cordylines of this sort of size have been suddenly dying. People have talked about a Cordyline disease, maybe even a phytophthora that's infecting Cordylines, but I don't actually think that's correct. I think that these plants probably live 40 to 60 years, and then they've had their life. They overseed, they overflower, and then they start dying back. And that may be assisted by cold winds, very, very dry summers, or a combination of all those factors. So what we've tried to do here is a holding operation. It may well be that we find a few more of these branches die off. It's interesting, if you look at this branch here, that the shoot is trying to form aerial roots. So the plant is saying, yes, this shoot is great, and if we were nearer the ground, we would root away. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more dieback, but what I think will probably happen now is that we'll start to see sprouting next year from around the base, and I think a whole new clump will form and develop and grow on. If you look at this shoot here, you know, that shoot's only a few years old, and it's appeared because where the daylight could get into the trunk and where a new shoot could form and prosper. And that too is what you see with mature Cordylines growing in avenues in Cornish coastal towns. So I don't think we did anything wrong. I don't think wherever else you see Cordylines like this coming into their last legs have done anything wrong. What I am convinced of is that if we hadn't pruned it properly now, the whole lot probably would have been dead in a year's time. I may yet be proved wrong, but I'd be very surprised if we don't see some lush new shoots appearing low down at the base. I was quite tempted to cut the whole lot down to the base at about that sort of height and see whether it reshot. And actually, if we get dieback this winter, that may be how I'll tackle the problem next spring. But for the meantime, hopefully we've acted quickly enough to keep this remarkable old Cordyline going. At least we've given it the best chance possible to grow on. Hopefully it won't flower and seed as much next year, and will put its energy into producing new shoots. An interesting story about Cordylines: every one that you see in a bad way, one needs to treat differently, but I think a stitch in time probably allows prospects for it to grow on again in the future and not die away to nothing, as we've seen quite often in unmanaged rows of Dracaena palms or cordylines in Falmouth.